Hello and welcome to Reader Watch. We are your hosts. I am Michelle and this is Ashton.
Hello.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about The Hunger Games. In this case, that is the 3 books and the 4 movies, not the newest book, because it is a prequel and it is currently irrelevant to what we're going to be talking about, though I may slip a little nugget about it in. We're truly not talking about it.
Plus, the movies were primarily produced as an adaptation of those original 3 books, for that prequel becoming after. So we'll just focus on that material today, primarily.
Yes. But in the future, you can look forward to us potentially doing a reader watch about the new one because it is being adapted into a movie, so I've been told. So there you go. No one's been cast as of yet, so that's to be coming in the future. So as with this show, I'm going to tell you that typically I am a reader. I like to read things before I watch them. And that is the case of The Hunger Games. I actually read all of the books before I watched any of the movies.
Yeah, and in contrast, usually I watch things first. Movies are that much easier to comprehend, and usually I'll just go back to the books. In this case, however, I actually read the trilogy before the movies came out.
Cool.
And for those of you who are wondering, by the way, The Hunger Games is a future dystopian story set in the fictional country of Panem, in which 12 districts are ruled by the capital, i.e. the central governmental power, and is centralized on the titular Hunger Games, an event in which each district sends 2 children, a girl and a boy, in a fight to the death, broadcast live on TV to the entire country. Specifically, it follows Katniss Everdeen.
Katniss Evergreen.
That's the one. A girl from District 12, which is the poorest and povertiest of the districts in this, and the Civil War and Revolution that follows her Hunger Games.
So it's Katniss Everdeen, for those who actually don't know. It's not Cactus Evergreen, it's Katniss Everdeen. That's about her and her journey and
that's
such.
Important. Katniss Everdeen.
Katniss Everdeen. So I feel like the thing that we need to talk about first is just the casting of all the movies. All 4 movies.
There's some cast to be talked about with these adaptations.
Yeah,
stuff that they nailed spot on, and maybe some that maybe we disagreed with. I feel like mutually in some cases.
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, definitely some that could have been better. Some that were just like I couldn't think of anything better. And
yeah.
I think with this one, because the Hunger Games books were so popular and so well known when they were being adapted into a movie, that I feel like that had some influence on who they were able to get in the movies, because there are some pretty big names, in my opinion.
Yeah, like a surprising
and I think that helps.
Major names.
Yeah. So you start us off. Like, who are you loving in the movies?
And all right, who am I loving? Okay, so before we get to that, I kind of feel like we need to talk about Katniss.
Mm-hmm.
She is the title character. She is the one that we follow, not just in the books, but also throughout the entire movies. She's played, of course, by Jennifer Lawrence. This is, by the way, where I was introduced to her. I don't know about you. I almost feel like this is where she kind of made a break into Hollywood. And I mean, on a character note, I actually really liked her. I feel like she hit a lot of the character notes for what you get from the book as far as Katniss is concerned. She pulls off the awkward, she pulls off the anger, she pulls off a lot of the deeper emotional reactions that you get in there. That said, I feel like I kind of need to talk about the way her and a lot of people from District 12, in fact, are physically described, which is, what was it, kind of an olive
tone, gray eyes.
Yeah, which I don't know, maybe this is just my interpretation. I always read that as a person of color, which, for those who aren't aware, Jennifer Lawrence isn't, as far as I'm aware anyway.
For those who aren't aware, if you haven't seen her, she's a white girl.
Yeah, just in case you've...
Is she blonde for real, or brunette? I don't know what her actual hair color. I think she might be blonde. I'm not
sure. I've only seen her in movies, and she has a rainbow of hair colors, so who knows, really. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's really the only gripe I had with her on the casting side. Other than that, I actually really loved her as Katniss. But yeah, so I don't know. What did you think about Jennifer Lawrence?
Ooh, Same, kind of similar. So she gives me, this is going to be a weird thing to say, she gives me Kristen Stewart vibes in her awkwardness.
I feel that.
Yeah, and it does work really well for this character because Kat, like the thing that people need to remember upon reading the books, like Katniss is not likable. She
Yeah.
hates people. People don't like her. Like it's really drilled in. It is kind of drilled in the movies because Haymitch does often comment on the fact that she's an unlikable person, but like she is not warm at all. She is very cold. She's actually quite calculated. She is has had to live this life where her big focus is surviving. So because of
Mhm.
that, she has mad trust issues. Like she does not like anyone who isn't helpful to her in some capacity. And I think Jennifer Lawrence does a really good job of making her a sympathetic character without weakening that aspect of her. So
Yeah.
I think she did well, all things considered. The look of her bums me out a bit. I also saw her as a person of color. So that was a little bit disappointing that they went that route, but it is Hollywood and that is kind of to be expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is what it is. But I think she nailed it as far as actually playing the character emotionally and even physically. I have some problems with her skinniness. Of course, it is Hunger Games. She is literally
Well,
starving, but
yeah.
but in the books, there is clear mention of her packing on muscle. There's a
Right.
couple
Okay.
different, like in the second book and the third book, there's a couple of chapters dedicated to training and like physically training.
Mhm.
We don't see that in the movie, so she doesn't gain the accompanying muscle, but I wish that had been addressed. This is just like going into a plot difference, but how is she such a badass come the second Hunger Games and everything that follows if she's never been trained as a soldier, as a fighter? None of that. Her being able to shoot an arrow doesn't actually carry her through everything. She actually does in the books take a lot of time to train and learn these other skills and get really strong. And I wish that had been followed through because I want to see a strong, like not jacked, but like a strong female, physically strong looking. And
Right.
I wish that had happened for her because it does happen in the books. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think there is something to be said about, and this is something that I'll constantly harp on about with every single thing we talk about the nature of adaptation and the limited time frame you have in a film. But at the same time, clearly there's training sections in the first and second movies, so I definitely agree that there's something maybe a bit lacking insofar as muscle development or the actual training that she put into the Hunger Games.
yeah, because I know, well, going to another cast member, PETA,
Hmm.
he put on some muscle for the role and then lost it as was supposed to happen, obviously, because he had time in the third and fourth movies.
Yeah.
But he put on a lot of muscle for his character of PETA, and Jennifer Lawrence didn't put on a lot of muscle for Katniss, and I
Right.
wish.
Well, I think almost to that aspect, Peeta as a character is supposed to be like this absolute powerhouse. I mean,
Mhm.
that's part of the strategy that they put into their first Hunger Games was, strong. And of course, he comes from a baking, and of course, he comes from a baking family. By the way, apologies to the audio listeners who didn't get that visual joke, but say la vie and all that.
That
Which,
means you
but
just have to
okay,
watch YouTube. Sorry, guys.
you just got to do
Can't
it.
just listen to the podcast.
By the way, Josh Hutcherson did such a phenomenal job of making Peeta a likable character.
Yes.
Because like in the books,
Yes.
like he's described as being like the one who can play a crowd and the one who like actually knows how to do the showmanship thing,
Hmm.
and at the same time being like an emotionally vulnerable guy. And he
Hmm.
does such a good job. Like even when we get to Mockingjay, like when he's has to take on like some anger, some aggression
Hmm.
to because of what happened plot wise,
Yeah.
he nails that role.
He's perfect. And like the only problem I have is again a visual problem is Peeta's supposed to be taller than Katniss, but Josh Hutcherson is a short dude. And honestly, I don't notice it that much at all because
Yeah.
he still commands like such a presence. I think he is so talented in this role. It's unbelievable, especially
Hmm.
with the hijacking. That
Yeah.
whole sequence, particularly of him choking Katniss, Holy, the emotions that you feel just, oh my God, that,
Yeah,
whoa.
like there's a lot to be said about Jennifer Lawrence's emotional range, but Josh
Mhm.
Hutcherson brings it in spades at the same time.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
they are
yeah.
like they're like head to head as far as like the emotional range that they carry in this series.
Yeah.
Like God,
Yeah.
even like in like this like subtle looks that they give, there's so
Mhm.
much performance that I think is overlooked insofar as like what they bring to
Yeah.
the table.
And then
Uh
meanwhile, we have wet blanket Gale.
God, okay,
Like,
so I need to so full disclosure, I've always been a bit annoyed with Gale as a character. um and
yeah.
like
Oh, for sure.
and like um to his credit, Mr. Hemsworth, Liam Hemsworth, does bring a lot of performance to the table as Gale, but you're up against Peeta, my dude. There's
Yeah.
only so much
You're
you can bring.
Team PETA over here. Like, it's not for anyone who is
Exactly.
ever Team
Well,
Gale. What world are you living in? Did you read the same books as us?
did you read the
Get
books? Did you
out.
watch the movies?
Right? I'm like, I get it that Hemsworth is a specimen. He's an attractive looking dude, but that's all he has going for him, truly.
I mean,
Because he
like,
is such like he's such a friend zone bitch.
I mean,
Like
okay, so in the
oh
middle of in the middle of the first Hunger Games, a thing that like you have, I think I can't remember what the math was though. Like you have probably a 4% chance of like coming back alive. He's watching
Mhm.
the TVs, being like, "Oh my God, but she kissed him. They're in the middle of a war, but was that kiss real though? Come on."
Yeah, there's bigger things to worry about, dude. Like, I get it, but also he has been around Katniss their whole lives. He's
Yeah,
never expressed like any type of attraction to her or anything of that nature until someone else is interested in her. And then he's like, wait, I have to compete now. Like, let me get my alpha male pants on. Like, he gets so annoying about it. Um, I Gale's a terrible character. I think Hemsworth did the best he could, but I also just think that character is not written in a way that actually translates super well into the movie.
yeah. I
Because
think
there
there's
was
a
no point where I'm like, oh, will she go with him or will she won't? It's
yeah.
very clear that he is not her choice.
Yeah, and like mind you, Katniss as a character not being terribly romantic to begin with. I mean,
Mhm.
she's focused on much larger issues, just like you said. But
No.
like, I feel like we're harping on Gale a lot here. Again, I feel like I need to reiterate: Liam Hemsworth does a great job with what he's given there. This is kind
Mhm.
of down to Gale as a character at
Yeah.
his core.
Yeah. He just doesn't adapt well to the movie, I think. Like, he's a
Yeah,
little bit more understandable in the book. In the movie, all you get of him is those weird scenes of him looking at
yeah,
the TV being like, "Oh my God, she kissed him." And that doesn't do anything to make us as the viewer
yeah.
like root for the dude. We're just like, "You're weird."
Although Liam has some phenomenal emotional scenes in Mockingjay Part Two.
Yes. Yes. Their
Um,
final confrontation scene is perfection.
yeah.
Like exactly how I imagined it, just as painful.
Yeah, like he does an emotion like such a good job of bringing that emotion to the table.
Mhm.
Um, so on the topic of like characters who I think were adapted perfectly, getting off of Gale there,
Mhm.
Haymitch,
Oh,
Woody Harrelson was such a perfect casting for this character. Like,
yes.
I'll be honest, like I think when I first heard about Woody Harrelson being cast, I wasn't entirely sure if he'd be I find Woody Harrelson an attractive guy, so I wasn't sure if it'd be like a bit too much for the character. But like within the
Mm,
first 5 seconds, you're sold on him as like
yeah.
as the drunk he is. By the way, Haymitch being the like one of two um victors from District 12, so like dude's been through a lot.
Mhm.
But yeah, like there's like such there's a so just because we are going on a bit, I feel like we need to talk about like a lot of the characters that other characters that maybe were cast, in my opinion, perfectly. Caesar and Sin. No, not yeah, Caesar and Cinna. Stanley
Caesar
Tucci.
Flickerman and
Yeah,
Cinna,
yeah,
yeah.
Stanley Tucci. Like, which by the way, I forgot that was Stanley Tucci because that's a guy who disappears into his roles.
Oh, for sure. Even before we recorded, when you're like, yeah, Stanley Tucci, I was like, wait, oh yeah, that is
Yeah,
him.
and like as like the showman that he is, he does such a great job of like um almost making like when when he gets into like a TV mode, it almost makes you forget the tone of what you're watching. At least for
No, for
me.
sure. I mean, and that was his, like, that is the character's role in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think he just pulls it off masterfully.
Yeah, he's so fun to watch. President Snow, I don't think they could have got a better casting than Donald Sutherland.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
he pulls off menacing, he pulls off calculating. I bumped my microphone, I was so excited. um, yeah, I don't know, like anyone that
I,
you else that you thought were perfect for the role?
I need to go back to Cinna for a moment
Yeah, Lenny
because
Kravitz.
Cinna is, this is like a statement. He's my favorite character in Hunger Games. He is
He's
my
like,
favorite.
I don't know that he's my favorite. He's easily top 3.
He's literally he's my number one. It's crazy. It's crazy of all the characters, and he's truly not
Well,
in it that much. But the impact that he has on Katniss and then on everything, he is a brilliant, brilliant character, brilliant man, and like, oh, I'm
well, I think,
obsessed. And
yeah.
Lenny Kravitz is like he's exactly what I pictured when they have like they were for him they were so careful with his description, and his flicks of gold eyeliner is the only
Yeah.
description you're given of him. And man, does he rock that gold eyeliner. It's such a vibe, it is such a look. He brings this like beautiful warmth to the character that I envisioned being a huge part of this character, and it just checked every box for me. Every scene I'm like, oh my god. Though I do have a slight narrative problem with his story because they robbed him, I think, in the movie a little bit of his power and his decision making, because in creating that final dress for Katniss that would turn into the Mockingjay, he says something to the effect of, you know, the way he makes a statement is through his art and it'll only hurt him. And he says that to Katniss. So when he is literally murdered in front of her, he's already accepted that's going to happen. He knows that's going to happen to him. And it's just as tragic, but it feels like he really went out fighting in his own way. And I feel like they robbed him of that in the movie because he didn't get to make that statement of like,
I don't know.
I
I
know
think,
what's going to happen.
I mean, he didn't get to verbally say that in the movie, but I mean, speaking to Lenny Kravitz's performance of the character, I kind of got an idea that just, from the performance, from the way they executed it in the movie, I kind of got the idea that that was his statement.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I don't know. I wanted him to say it to Katniss
Oh, I
specifically.
get that.
That was, I don't know, but he 10 out of 10. And
Yeah.
okay, speaking of my other capital fave, oh my god, Effie. Effie
Yeah.
Trinket. Oh my goodness, that's Elizabeth Banks. And
Yeah.
she is spectacular as Effie. That's a weird character that I wasn't really sure what she was going to play out like, how she was going to sound, like her mannerisms, her performance. Elizabeth Banks kills it as Effie. She's so funny and so clueless in just like the perfect way that it really does work as kind of this foil to Haymitch, as it does in the book. And I just think it's super, super good, except she dies. She's supposed to die. She's not supposed to make it to 13. And I get it because she was such a good character and Elizabeth Banks is such a great person playing her.
Yeah, well, I
But
think,
I was disappointed that we were robbed of her death, which sounds crazy.
well, movies being what they are, they didn't really have the chance to develop, because it was the makeup team that
Yeah,
originally made it to
her prep
13.
team.
But like, yeah, it was like that prep team that they had the time to develop in the books, but
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't really get that development in the movies, so I can kind of get why they went with Effie.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, more Elizabeth Banks, what she brings to that character.
It's hard to complain that they didn't kill her because she's so good.
Yeah.
And the final kiss between her and Haymitch, there's something about it that just, I love it. I love it. It's so not necessary, but it's really cute. And I really liked
really
it.
was. Okay, so speaking of capital people, I feel like there's an actor that I need to mention, and that's Philip Seymour Hoffman as Plutarch.
Plutarch Heavensby.
Yeah,
Heavensby?
who was the game maker in Catching Fire, went on to help the rebellion and all that. And actually, I'm pretty sure Mockingjay was his last role as an actor before his tragic death, before its release.
Yeah, because he's shown in part 2, but I'm pretty sure that it's CGI, and that's why he actually doesn't have any lines or anything in it. It's just
Yeah,
like
I
you
think
see the
he
profile
has
of his face.
I think he has minimal lines in there, doesn't he? Or if
I didn't
it's like
think he
some
had.
facial performance.
Yeah, he doesn't have a single line. You just see him at the when President Coin gets shot. You see him kind of like do a little smirk, and then
Right.
Haymitch brings a letter to Katniss from him,
Yeah.
and reads it
Right. Yeah,
to
because that
her.
was originally supposed to be performed by him, but
Yeah,
he
and I thought
passed before.
I thought that was a good way around that.
Yeah.
And he was great. He was great.
Yeah,
Let's
because
like,
he really sold that
oh,
character.
so, yeah. I want to say I can't not give a shout out to my boy Finnick because 10
Yeah.
out of 10.
That was
10
another
out of
perfect
10.
casting. That
Yeah.
was Sam Claflin, who I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with his other work, but him as Finnick. Oh
Yeah.
my god.
His introduction with the sugar cubes, like that little scene
Mhm.
between him and Katniss, is perfect. His little smirk, his kind of cheekiness is so
Mhm.
great. And then just I mean, like you love him so much, and then it is really tragic when he dies. Like that,
Yeah.
it's just as devastating in the movie as it is in the book, and I think they actually did that death perfectly because
Mhm.
it's so chaotic in the book, and it feels like when I was reading it, it felt so fast. I had to like go back. I was like, wait, did Finnick just die? Did they
Honestly,
literally just
same.
kill this dude? It happens unbelievably fast. And then it happens
Mhm.
the same way in the movie where it's so fast that you almost don't get to register truly that he's dead until they're running out of the sewers. And then you're kind of reminded because you see that wanted poster for him and you're like, no, but he's straight up dead.
Mhm.
And that hurts, especially because he just got married to Annie and they're expecting a baby and it's just so sad.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, he
a
has.
great death for that character because that final fight before he does die is so good.
It really is. Like they did that part really well because like it was fast in the books. Like it was fast, it was chaotic, but you get because you get to have a bit more time on it in the movies. That actually sold it more for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, and obviously there are so many other characters that we could touch on. I mean, the other Victors, Beatty, Joanna,
Joanna, so
Mags.
good. Oh,
I cried when Mags died.
oh, Megs is such a champ.
Yeah,
Joanna, perfect casting as well. I think she was
100%.
great. She was so good.
Yeah, she brought like such a great aggression to that character.
I don't think I really hate any of the casting. Now that I'm thinking about it, like I have a couple gripes, but I think they actually like nailed everyone else.
Yeah, like
Um,
in retrospect, 100%.
yeah, I'm like going through. I'm like, wait, who don't I like? And I was like, the only characters I don't like are characters I actually don't like the character. It's not that the actor wasn't good. So shout out to the casting in this because it's pretty
Yeah, it was
spectacular.
beautiful. And moving to another department, the music. All
Mhm.
four movies were done by James Newton Howard, who is a phenomenal composer, and like literally every theme, every tune it sold like the exact tone that I read when I was reading the books.
Mhm.
Like the main theme, the Mockingjay theme, like the action stuff, it moved me. Literally, it moved me.
Yeah, I have to give special shout out to the singing.
Yeah.
So the two songs, the Meadow song and then the Hanging Tree. I remember reading the books, and it's hard reading a song. Like I'm not a musical person, so I had no idea what that would have sounded like. But I remember going on to YouTube and just searching them, and there were these beautiful songs that people had created. And I found this
Mhm.
version of the Hanging Tree that was just like hauntingly beautiful. It was so sad sounding. And so I was disappointed that that wasn't the one that was in the movie, but the way they put it in the movie as this like marching sound was so creative. When you
Yeah.
have her singing it and then you see the people storming the dam and they're all singing it, like if that doesn't give you chills, I don't know what will,
Yeah.
because that is such a good sequence. Like
Yeah,
that song
literally
is so good.
chills.
Yeah. Oh,
Which,
so
okay,
good.
so I think that brings an important thing to talk about. The books are entirely first person. It's
Yes.
all from Katniss's point of view, so you learn what she learns as she learns them.
Hmm.
Whereas the movies, they actually interject like cutaways to other scenarios, things that are happening in the meantime. Like in the first Hunger Games, in the first Hunger Games movie, it cuts to the game makers, it cuts to political machinations that are happening behind the scene, and
Yeah.
likewise in Mockingjay, like it cuts away to points of revolution.
Hmm. I I think that works really well because it's not to say that Katniss didn't understand that these things were happening in the background. Specifically in the first one, she understood that Haymitch was making deals for her in order to get her the things she needed in the arena. So when they were dropping the little packages, there were no notes in the book. She had to kind of understand what Haymitch was doing. In this case, there were little notes, so us, the viewer, could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I really liked, because obviously they knew when they're making the first Hunger Games movie, they're gonna make a trilogy or 4 movies, whatever.
Yeah, it ended up becoming a tetralogy.
Sure. That one. So it makes sense that they're setting up this like revolution, even in the first one, because in the first one, when Rue dies, we do see her district revolt. And that doesn't happen at that time in the original book, but we do find out about it later, which brings me to one of my biggest complaints or things that got changed that I'm like, ooh, I wish they didn't change it. And that is Madge. So this is actually the character that gave Katniss the Mockingjay pin.
Yeah.
So she is the daughter of the mayor of District 12. So in the book, she's like kind of friends with Katniss. Like they're friendly. Katniss doesn't think they're friends. But when Katniss gets chosen from the Reaping, Madge brings her this pin being like, it was my aunt's. It would mean so much if you take this with you as your token. Katniss is like, sure, I don't even have a token. It's like, this is fine.
Well, like,
it's so important though, because the actual story behind that freaking pin, which is expanded upon in the prequel book. So like, yes, but that pin actually belonged to a past tribute of District 12. And it was the girl who died with Haymitch, like in Haymitch's game. It's Maisie Donner, who's So I know this information is actually contained within the original trilogy of books. So Madge's aunt, Maisie Donner, was the original owner of the Mockingjay pin. She died in Haymitch's game. She was his other tribute in the game that he won. Yeah. So what this pin actually does, besides the fact that it's a Mockingjay, which I'll get into my whole thing about that after, it's a thing for Haymitch more than anything else, because it was his partner tribute's token. So he sees the significance of it as like this tie to Maisie, who was his friend back in the day. And Maisie, the original tribute, was Katniss's mom's best friend. And this is all in the books, all in that original trilogy. And they just completely remove all of that by being like, hey, I found it in a market. I think it's cool.
Because I thought an interesting change was that in the books, the tributes were allowed to bring a token. Like it was this whole thing where, like, you know, they had to do security checks on tokens or whatever. Whereas in the movie, it's like they snuck that in.
Smuggle it in.
Yeah, they smuggled it in. Almost turned that into like its own initial act of rebellion.
Yeah.
Which I mean is an interesting narrative change, but taking Madge out of that does definitely change some things or take something away.
It's interesting. And the other thing, because I have a couple things that I'm just like, I wish they'd done better with in the movie. The other thing is the mutations. So what I mean by that, for people who maybe don't know the books or haven't read the books a million and one times like I have, it's these mutts that they're referring to. So it's these capital creations. So in the first Hunger Games, you see the dog thingies. Those are the mutations. The monkeys in the second game. The weird little alien thingies in the sewer in the final one.
Like down to the Jabberjays.
So that's the part I want to talk about, because the significance of a Mockingjay in particular is actually a huge symbol of rebellion. Not just as it relates to Katniss, and they don't talk about that really that much in a way that makes sense. So the Capitol, back when it was like just the time after the Civil War originally that split the districts, they created this mutation called a Jabberjay, which was a bird that would record people's conversations, fly back to the Capitol, and then the Capitol would replay those conversations. So they'd find out who was traitors and they would kill people. The thing that the Capitol didn't prepare for was that the Jabberjays were going to mate with mockingbirds, thus creating Mockingjays, which were the birds that could carry a tune that they'd heard someone singing. So that was like the ultimate rebellion from the Capitol originally. So that's like the actual symbolism behind the Mockingjay. So it's not just the bird, it's what it represents. It represents the initial rebellion against the Capitol. So it's like so much more. So they missed that completely. And they don't go as far into what the mutts actually are and how freaking scary they are.
Yeah,
Because
because
the
in
dog mutts are so scary in the book, and they're just like big old dogs in the movie.
yeah, well, because I think in the, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the Hunger Games, like those big dogs were kind of genetically engineered to represent the fallen tributes. So like it's a horrifying moment when you see them in the first book.
Yeah,
But like
they
in the
have the
movie, they are
tribute's
just kind of,
eyes, and they're
yeah.
and Katniss isn't sure how they got the eyes. Did they rip them out of the dead tributes, or like? And it's that like not knowing aspect, because it's
Hmm.
meant to. It's not just a scary thing that's going to hurt you. It's meant to like mess you up mentally. The final alien things, which in the book they're lizards. They're not like, they don't look so humanoid. They can go on their hind legs, but they're primarily lizard things. But the really freaky thing about them is they smell like Snow's roses. And
Hmm.
that you couldn't, I don't know how they would have put that in the movie besides the character being like, why do they smell like roses? But
Yeah,
it
what's that
kind of, you
perfume smell?
lose, yeah, you lose the impact of the word mutt. So then when Katniss turns around and calls Peeta a mutt, it doesn't have the same impact, because the mutt is not just a scary thing. It is a thing that is meant to like mess with you mentally.
Yeah, the
It's meant to
capital
like
is
really fuck you up.
yeah, the capital is very big on psychological torture, not just in the or especially in the books, some in the
Mhm.
movies, but
Yeah.
again, nature of adaptation and all that. But
Yeah. So I don't
yeah,
know. Those are my big two, because besides that, honestly, I think it's a really fair like series of adaptations.
yeah, like I think this, like they've really pulled it off with this one, in my opinion. Like
Hmm.
I think going to many adaptations, obviously there's a lot that needs to be left out on the cutting room floor, as it were.
Hmm.
But the way they executed what they did, the Hunger Games might be one of my favorite adaptations in that regard.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. It's funny because I've read the book so many times, and I've only seen the movie now 3 times each. Finishing them today. And I was actually surprised by how similar they are and how true to the tone and the characters and the dialogue and the sequences. Like it's very
Mm,
true. And in all cases, like in all of them, I'm very happy. I know some people aren't happy that they made Mockingjay into 2 movies. I truthfully
mhm.
don't think you would have been able to. It would have to be like a 4 hour one movie, and that
Exactly,
nobody
because
wants to sit
there
through
is,
that.
because Mockingjay is such a dense movie. Like not just like like as far as what information there is, like
Mhm.
for how much
It's
plot
heavy.
happens. Yeah, it's heavy. Like
Mhm.
characters die. Like there's so much. Like that's straight up war in that one.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm not sure how I feel about is the actual violence of everything, because I feel like it's
Okay.
actually inconsistent throughout the movies of when you really see blood and when you really don't.
Okay. So
So
I think yeah.
there are some deaths that are bloody, that you see blood, you see the injury, you see the violence, and then there are some that you literally don't.
Hmm.
And you also don't get as much carryover of people getting injured and having to deal with those injuries later on. So the thing I'm referring to particularly, Peeta lost a leg in the first
Yeah.
one.
So that's okay. So I think that's one thing that I will say that the movies could have really picked up upon was that Katniss and Peeta literally came out of the first Hunger Games disabled.
Mhm.
Like Katniss was deafened in one ear, which is something that's like so critical to how she treats the Hunger Games and how she treats war,
Mhm.
all that stuff going forward. And Peeta, like you said, because of the leg injury he sustains, like he isn't like he has it amputated. He has like a prosthetic leg throughout the
Mhm.
rest of the the books,
Yeah.
and that wasn't in the movie. I don't know if that was just like for the sake of convenience or whatever, but like that was such a major part of the characters that I think they missed out on, and I would have
Yeah.
loved to have seen that portrayed, uh, especially by those two fantastic actors.
I know. I know. I think it was a bit of a miss, because it almost felt that the stakes of the game weren't that high, because we
Hmm.
didn't truly get to see the mental and emotional toll, because we're not getting that voiceover, we're not getting the thoughts from Katniss constantly, and like they did touch on like the nightmares and that sort of thing, but it's not that full depth. So by having the physical representation of what happened to them in games of these long forever injuries, I think that would have sold it a bit better. But that's just my, like, I don't know why I want them to be injured, but I wanted them to be
Well, I
injured.
think it's a story thing, right? Like
Mhm,
those were very specifically story points,
mhm,
like to kind of almost like very physically and literally represent like the trauma that you carry from the games, because like they do get, like you said, like do get into like the mental, like the PTSD and what have you. Haymitch is an alcoholic because
mhm,
he's a mentor to tributes who are just going to die,
mhm.
like, and like Katniss and Peeta, like they have nightmares. There's so much like psychological damage that happens both like in every single way, but like her being deafened in the one ear because of the explosion, Peeta being a literal amputee.
Mhm.
I mean, there was so much character in that. So I don't think it was so much about wanting to see characters injured. It was what that meant on a character level, what that meant to the story,
Yeah.
that I think they did. I think in a way miss out on.
Mhm. This has nothing to do with those movies or those books, but I'm just gonna say it because I think a lot of people share my opinion if you're a fan of Hunger Games. Um, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so the newest book, which came out in 2020, which follows Snow as a child, as a young person,
Hmm.
didn't need to happen. Screw that book. Where's my Haymitch story? That's what,
Okay,
give the people what they want.
I haven't. So for the record, I haven't read the President Snow book. I 100% agree. I don't think Snow needed his own book.
Mhm,
If it was about the tribute from District 12, give her own
mhm,
book. What I really wanted, which they 100% expand upon in the books that they didn't, mind you, have the time to get to in the movies, was how fascinating Haymitch was as a character. Like how
mhm,
like how he won his Hunger Games, like what that, like how smart he was, how clever he was, what that did to him as a character. I think I bumped my mic again, but you get
yeah,
the point. Um,
yeah. I would rather see, because so the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I hate that name first of all, but I don't know what the purpose of it is because it follows Snow and his role in create not fully creating the Hunger Games, but in adapting them to what they become by the time the Hunger Games movie happens. And it's his love story with a tribute from District 12. And it adds a lot of like fluff and extra context to a lot of the things that happen in the original trilogy, which makes it make more sense why Snow has it so out for Katniss initially, because it seems like his hatred of her is a little too strong initially, but then
mm,
it does make sense eventually. But I want to see Haymitch origin story, and because the Songbird and Snake book, it's depressing at the end. The bad guy wins. Like he's still alive. We know he lives for another 4 books or 3 books or whatever.
yeah, well, I
If we're
mean,
gonna do a depressing ending of a book, I want to see, and this is me just being evil. I want to see Haymitch being the mentor to every group of tributes that came before Katniss and Peeta. Because my God, do they not talk about that enough? He won how many
yeah,
years ago? There's a Hunger Games every year. So every year he is watching 2 kids from his district die because he can't help them.
yeah, because I think that was
Oh
a
my
major
God.
point of his character, like why he became an alcoholic, was just to kind of numb that. Like he's like, by the time you get to the first Hunger Games, he is so callous towards Katniss and Peeta, and that's
Mhm.
because by that point he's seen everyone die. So like he's given up by that point, which
Yeah.
isn't something they really have time to get into in the movie, but like it's such a major part of his character. And like,
Mhm.
not to harp on actors, not to get back to actors again, but Woody Harrelson pulls it off to a T.
Yeah. Uh, because they don't dive into it enough, but because like I wish they had that original drunken scene of Haymitch falling off the stage.
Yeah.
Because that's like what better character intro for this guy than him falling off the stage at the tribute, like, oh, you just got pulled on the Hunger Games, here's a guy who's going to teach you how to do it. Oh,
Yeah.
he's too drunk to stand on the stage. Great. But I think they removed that because it probably would have made the scene too funny and not as iconic as it is. Like, I
Yeah.
volunteers tribute, like, who hasn't said that for things now? Like, that's the most
Hmm.
memed scene in the whole series, I
Oh,
think. So
100%. Like I still use that meme like to
oh, I
this
say it all the
day.
time. I say it all the time.
And
And I also, may the odds be ever in your favor. I say
okay,
that
can
one
I
too
also,
often.
like, just as a minor aside, these books are political as all hell. Like they're like remarkably political. And I think the movies did a great job of um not just portraying how political the games themselves are, the relationship with the districts and the capital, but also like the political gray areas that you get into with Mockingjay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I think I really appreciated the way they adapted them with the cutaways, because
Mm,
if it's all from Katniss's point of view, like you said, like she does understand that to a degree, but there's so much more machinations that are happening behind the scene that I think that I appreciated the adaptations making time for.
yeah, I agree. It gives you more of a full, well-rounded story by having those cutaways.
Yeah,
Because if you just had Katniss doing her thing without the voiceover and her thoughts and her understanding and her puzzling through what's happening to her, then we're just watching a story of a girl do some stuff and survive, and that's
yeah,
it. Which, I mean, good story still, but it's not the story that we need to set us up for what eventually happens, like, and the global or political implications of her
yeah,
choices.
yeah, because they are huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to, of course, the big question of the show. If someone was in no way familiar with the Hunger Games, if they hadn't watched the movies, if they haven't read the books, would you tell them to watch it first? Would you tell them to watch the movies, or would you tell them to read the books first?
I'm actually having to think about it. I'm still not prepared to answer this.
It's a big
I
question, right?
It is a big question because they're both really, really good. I don't
Mm,
think, it's a clear cut where it's like, oh, that was atrocious and that was really good.
yeah.
I think, I mean, I'm biased because this is how I did it. I think you should read it first and then watch it. I think reading it gives you a bigger picture, and I think it makes Katniss a more understandable character in the movies. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so read it, then watch it. Don't read the prequel. Leave it at that.
All right. I've said that I watch things first, just because movies are typically more easy to digest in that bit of adaptation and digestibility and all that. That said, I would actually agree with you. I would say read the books before you get to the movies, purely because of the things that aren't in the books. Because I think that if you read the books and it's all from Katniss's perspective and the way she understands the world, you gain a better political and narrative appreciation for what happens behind the scenes and what they portray in the show. Not the show, the movies.
I getcha. I getcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that you actually get that much of a deeper appreciation for the movies because of the books.
Yeah.
So actually, we 100% agreed on this one.
We agree. I don't think we disagreed on anything. I
Not
feel like
yet.
it would be hard to disagree on something like this unless I just came in being like, hey, Mitch sucks. Like, excuse me. So thank you all so much for watching and or listening, however you're consuming our content. Thank you for consuming it and filling your belly with our things. That sounds weird, but you get what I'm going for. This has been Reader Watch. Definitely let us know in the comments if there's anything else you want us to talk about. We're down for comic books and movies and other things that you read and video games. We just like content.
100%.
Let us do things.
Yeah, like we're not just talking about books. We're not just talking about comics. It is Reader Watch, but at the same time, if we're talking about, we're open to video game movies.
Super Mario Brothers coming out.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions, for 100% throw them in the comments. Maybe we'll get to it.
Yeah. This has been Reader Watch. I have been Michelle.
I have been Ashton.
Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Goodbye.